Hello, everyone. I hope you all are having a fruitful and engaging day thus far. This panel is titled Study, Struggle, and Liberation. My name is Ebony Johnson, and I will be introducing our panelists and our moderator. Our first student is Noah Humphrey. Noah is the Master of Divinity program at Yale University. However, he is studying remotely until the fall of next year in Oahu, Hawaii. He has recently graduated from Whittier College with a B.A. in Religious Studies and a minor in Holistic Care. Having preached his trial sermon at 16, becoming a minister at 18, and a chaplain for the 2019 to 2020 Whittier College football team, he wishes to continue to build on his spiritual leadership. Building on his experience in ministry and previous academic work in religious studies, his current research resides within Hawaiian shamanism, mana, healing leaders, neo-spiritualism, and direct mind-body-soul dichotomies in regards to indigenous peoples reacting to colonialism and Christianity. Black studies and the other liberation theologies have directed him in other areas in his research, such as diasporic groups, biblical studies, and infused directives of African American systemic histories. Noah is a future chiropractor, teacher, pastor, healer, and presenter, scholar, using his soul to speak through poetry, research, and devotion. Noah believes that anything is possible through God, support, and self-determination. Thank you for being here with us today, Noah.
Yes, no problem at all. And again, I just feel blessed to be on this panel itself. I'm lost. I'm really lost at words right now, but I'll start getting to the presentation itself.
Our next student is Steve Nunez. Steve received a Master of Theological Studies degree in religion, ethics, and politics from Harvard Divinity School in 2018 and is currently a third-year PhD student at the University of Connecticut studying Africana philosophy, philosophy of racism, existential phenomenology, Black aesthetics, philosophy of education, and carceral and abolition studies. His tentative dissertation project surrounds the politics and ethics of revolutionary counter-violence through the philosophical thought of Frantz Fanon. He teaches courses across University of Connecticut, including philosophy and social ethics, gender and sexuality in everyday life, and global existentialism. And during summers, he adjuncts at his alma mater, the University of North Carolina, Wilmington, instructing a course called Racism and the American Liberal Imagination. Steve is an alumni member of Harvard Prison Divestment Program, actively organizes with University of Connecticut Defund and Divestment Project, and is excited to help build a grassroots abolitionist movement transforming the political landscape of North Carolina with Carolina Federation. When he is not reading, writing, and organizing, Steve also loves to cook, bake, and is an avid photographer and loves trap music. Thank you for being here with us, Steve.
Turn up. Thank y'all.
Our next student is Jalen Parks. Jalen Parks is a second-year Master of Divinity candidate at Yale Divinity School, hailing from Flint, Michigan. At Yale, Jalen studies sit at the interstices of theology, ethics, and abolition. Jalen's commitment to educational and civic excellence lead him to a 2019 recipient of Yale's President's Public Service Fellowship and inaugural fund for theological exploration, fellow to the Society for Study of Black Religion. Above all else, Jalen wants folks to know that he is an abolitionist, writer, and student. The three of these, in their unity, succinctly convey all that he aspires to be and the praxis he employs on his journey through the world. As an abolitionist, he recognizes that all this must come to an end. And as a writer, he put pen to paper to convey his vision of the destruction of demonic systems. As a student, he is always learning, always seeking to refine, always seeking to be better without feeling as though he has arrived. Jalen currently serves as the president of the Yale Black Seminarians and is the 2019 graduate of Yale University. He is also a dog dad to a Canon, a mini golden doodle. Thank you for being here with us, Jalen Parks. Our next student panelist is Tatayana Richardson. She is a graduating senior who originally hails from Atlanta, Georgia. She is currently completing a double major in religion and African American studies with a minor in cultural anthropology at Duke University's Trinity College of Arts and Science. Her research focuses on the Black theological imperative and the constructs of the Black church. Along with her formal research, she serves as the spiritual formation coordinator for the Duke Wesley's Fellowship, while also working as a public theologian writer, op-ed pieces for the Duke Chronicle. Her ultimate goal is to work towards the critical engagement of the church in both the public and academic spheres in order to remind the world that Jesus was radical and thus we should be too. Thank you for being here with us, Tatiana.
Thanks for having me.
Our final student panelist is Richard X. Richard is a graduate student of Yale University with a research interest in theological ethics, Black studies, and gender. Thank you for being here with us, Richard.
Thank you for having me.
The moderator for this panel is our very own Amaia Cook. Amaia is currently pursuing a Master of Divinity at Harvard Divinity School and intends to graduate in 2023. Following the Black womanist tradition, she focuses on early Christianity and how the early church upholds modern forms of abolition, justice, and equity. Her academic interests relate to her advocacy efforts as she believes in and fights for liberation for the oppressed and the marginalized, particularly working in her local community to combat racial and socioeconomic injustices. She is also interested in the intersections of theory, religion, and social justice, and particularly how scholarship shapes social movements and vice versa. Most importantly, she is a dreamer, a lover, and truth seeker. Thank you for being our moderator today, Amaia.
Thank you so much, Ebony, for that warm welcome. And welcome everyone to our Rethinking Study as Transformative Justice student panel. This panel will explore the intersections of study and transformative justice, which is the structural change to oppressive systems to stop violence and reduce harm, particularly for marginalized people, while connecting broader themes of theory and practice. Panelists have formed their projects around the questions: how does study operate within racial capitalism, and how does it connect to religion and spirituality in a historical and present context? Panelists will also give accounts of what transformative justice and abolition mean to them and relate it to the conference theme, Black, liberation, activism, community, and kinship. Before we begin, I would like to take a moment of silence to recognize Kevin Zhang, a graduate student at the Yale School of the Environment who was shot and killed on Saturday, February 6th. We would also like to lift up his loved ones and Yale colleagues at this time. Next, I would like to send out my immense gratitude. Thank you to attendees for showing up and showing your support. Thank you to our panelists for the dedication and care they put into creating their presentations. You can find a link to the abstracts in the chat, or you can go to our website, harvardbrscc-bip.com, to find their abstracts and their bios. With that, I'm excited to start us off with our first presentation by Tatiana Richardson.
Okay, so what I'm talking about today, or what my project focuses on, is called What Happens in the Pulpit, Exploring the Consequences of Privileging the Black Theological Imperative in the Church and Academia. So theology has been defined in many ways and has many different terms. But when you look into Oxford English Dictionary, what you'll find is a definition that says, theology is the study or science which treats God, his nature, and his attributes, and his relation with man in the universe, also known as the science of divine things, or simply put as divinity. Now, biblical theology starts to originate around 1787 with J.P. Gabler's distinction. Before that, theology was non-dogmatic and it wasn't necessarily a description of religious doctrine. But following Gabler's distinction, there creates the presupposition that there can be one common way of thinking about the Bible, or one common way which informs the Bible as a whole. However, this creates an inconvergence, because when you presuppose that there's a common way of defining the Bible as one whole entity, or there's only one way to interpret it, it's misleading. What Black theologian James Cone tells us is that human speech about God is always related to historical situations, and it is culturally limited. And that means that there can't be one way to define theology, because it's a subjective speech about God that will tell us far more about the people doing the speaking, so about the God talkers, than it actually tells us about the maker and creator of heaven and earth. So this raises two questions. The first is, how might the domination of one type of Christian voice erase the experience of marginalized Christian voices? And to that end, what would be the consequence, not necessarily consequences in a negative connotation here, of privileging those marginalized theologies, most especially Black theology, on the same plane as like the normative theological canon, or this one dominant Christian voice? And that is where my research and my project come in. And so what I aim to do is to deconstruct this normative canon. And you have to understand that the normative canon is Euro white male dominated. And if that's kind of like what it makes you wonder what that means or who that entails, that would be people like your Martin Luther, John Wesley, John Calvin, Frederick Schleiermacher, Hegel, the list of all of the names that a religion professor might expect you to know or ask you to read. Those are the people that dominate the canon. And so understanding that if this is what the canon is dominated by, there's definitely not a way to build universal theology, because many of these voices come from a similar experience. So what they're defining as universal is actually a very particularly white male dominated understanding. So to deconstruct this, I analyze the Black theological imperative. And this examines the way that Black theology can speak to a more diverse range than what the current normative canon is. This also allows for the critiquing of theological fallacies, specifically through what I focus on, which is liberation theology and womanism. And I add in womanism because womanism speaks to some of the spaces that liberation theology doesn't, which is addressing gender differences, socioeconomic differences, and making corrections to even Black theology. So understanding that none of these theologies are perfect, but in using both of them, we're able to create a canon that is actually closer to a diverse understanding than the one that we have now. And in doing that, what happens is we're able to rewrite what constitutes the canon, understanding that writing marginalized theologies into the normative canon is a proper corrective course for both academia and the church. Now, the question is, why does any of this matter, or why should you care, right? And the answer is because the church is dying as a result of some of the prominent theologies that it uses, which don't speak to a diverse group of people. The ivory tower, or academia, is also racist because of this same reason. and so is a normative Christian canon, both consciously and unconsciously. So when we use these marginalized theologies, we have the power to rectify or to create, like I said, this course correction. And while I specifically start with Black theology, my aim is to use it as an introduction to allowing other marginalized theologies to also be written in as a course correction. So we start with Black theology, but it also speaks to the fact that Latinx or Asian theologies or queer theologies can and should also be written into this canon as a way to fix this one dominant narrative that doesn't speak to everybody. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tatiana. And our next presenter will be Noah Humphrey.
Hello, everyone. My name is Noah Humphrey, and this is my presentation on the Black man in Dachau. This is a person of whom not much history is known about, and I've done my best to recreate more of his steps and also his story as well. And the picture feed right here, along with the arrow, is essentially a Black man within a concentration camp in World War II, Germany. And the background with African in Germany itself is more so German like moms, and also African dads itself too. There was actually bases within Germany which they were serving within like the French army itself. And again, the term for like these children of like the nation itself was the Rhineland-Bass. And Blacks have been living in Germany since like it was formed in 1871. But again, with Hitler himself, he tried to make it seem like it was the problem of like the Jews. And there is a quote right here that I added that said, with like deliberate intent to destroy the white race, he hates by persistent bastardization to hurl it from the cultural and political height it has attained and to send them as its master. As in he basically combined both combined the Jewish like problem, contributed to the Africans within its own nation, even though the Africans were here before the fourth nation of the country itself. And again, the agenda in which I want to address is just the history of Dachau, the employment in which Johnny Boss, the Black man in like Dachau, went to like through how is it connected with the World War II, the resistance force in which he was a resistance fighter in, the liberation of Johnny Boss, like kind of like the speculations that was made, and just a conclusion with a quote by John himself. And again, what was Dachau? Dachau actually started as a communist camp right after the Reichstag burnings itself, and over time it began to become more of it began to revolutionize the more prisoners came into the camp, as in they wanted to section off these political groups and also these racial groups as well too, in order to inseminate them in a line in which they are proved ineffective. And they found ways to put some times within these camps to make do, such as building a library, a market, and they even had a clergy area in which like the priests and like the spiritual leader of like these community groups convened. Again, that brings us to sort of Johnny Boss. Johnny Boss is like past is not known, but from what I collected before, he was from like the Belgian his like mom was a Belgian, his like dad was a Congolese soldier, which again with like the Rhineland bastards mentioned before, it's a very unique situation with Johnny Boss, and his story is just more intrigued with the fact that he became a Belgian resistance fighter, and also he came to Dachau in 1942 because of the sabotages in which he did like guerrilla warfare by blowing up train tracks and making sure that no more recruits from the like going into these concentration camps would happen. And he did everything again to stop the influx of prisoners with these groups. His work in that itself, again, with the divine intervention part, I added that because again, it was just so it like tied into what he was doing before, and that was finding a way to resist. As in, he had a job stacking vitamin crates, but he used that job to support the people around him. He used that as a part of fighting within the system in which he was laid when like he was sent to Dachau. So he even helped out the guards. He helped out the people around him and used them as a way to help heal and also grow. Because again, through like this like time, there was a shortage of like food near like the end of Dachau itself, and quite like possibly as well with his vitamin rationing, he saved many lives because of it. And again, there was like reports of within Dachau itself that they used that like he actually used like these items for like trades for like fruit, for different books, and just ways to keep himself alive as well. And that connection to the war, John Evalds was possibly connected or actually was attracted to the V for Victory campaign in 1941, a British more so media attention grabber used to bring more soldiers to fight against the Nazi regime. And they used different Belgian phrases, images to attract more fighters who actually stir a bit of more patriotism into them. And again, right here where you see the lion and also the crown itself too, there is a sign that says unity makes strength, as in the more people you have, the more the more stronger you are to fight off these threats. And again, the motivation itself too, because as a resistance fighter, he was offered many positions as well too, was offered food, and was much more bet. He was going to be in a much more better like state joining like the army than like off. So he took that opportunity. And then with his occupation as a fighter, his like rank is unknown, but again, he did contribute to the guerrilla tactics used, because that is how he got into Dachau in like the first like place. And again, like I mentioned before about blowing like train like tracks up, but also like pushing the supplies as well too, and just doing everything they can to sabotage the Nazi plans. And that was the reason why in which he was thrown to Dachau as well, which was nearly 350 miles from his homeland. And again, like that, this in itself was used because that was a tactic used to separate and like to make sure that there was no like internal conflicts within like the prison itself, so that the resistant fighters couldn't overturn everything from like the inside out. And again, the liberation, he was freed from April 29th, 1945, and a soldier from the Liberation Army took like this photo as well, because this was like a month after per se, just like seeing the fact that there was actually a Black man in Dachau was very awing, because like there was like reports of the soldiers of saying like this isn't supposed to happen. Like, why is this person here exactly? And for like the time that he was done for 3 like years, like no one heard about him. There was no studies done. Like there's no record books at all containing this in like information about basically lost in time. And just the reason why I wanted to just approach this topic more like so is because there's still so much unknown about this historical piece. And I just wanted to bring some part of it into fold. And again, the speculations, it's kind of what I've done with like the research that I've done. It's like his skin tone may have been due to his family moved to the north Congo itself, as in like I was just compared more so just the areas in which he could possibly have gone to, his family lineage back as much as I can. I just made rough like limits on that because again, it's just so much unknown. But his experience as a resistance fighter did like contribute to the way in which he was able to survive the camps itself, because he already knew from his experience, from like his training as well, that he could survive anything a part of it. He just needed some, it's just more so his ability to rise above what he was facing. And again, his like affiliation was like not too known about like the camps as well too, because he didn't really necessarily mention it to people. But again, I can assume that he wanted to hide it as well, just so that he could have less like a lack to, because they did so severely beat the prisoners there as well too, and possibly because he was Black, they could have targeted him. And his whereabouts after this is unknown. But one motto by John Ani is just saying, "No, you can't have my life. I will fight for it." That's kind of his that's kind of his, just the change of saying that I will continue to live, I will continue to move forward and help people around me, but also that my life is mine and that no system can break away from it. And then the reasons of the project itself, I just wanted to learn, just like build off the transformative justice within DACA itself. And again, about the abolition of the system of DACA and also the racial capitalism place there as well too. And again, just the actions of the Black body made with the community, with like the kinship development and making sure that Black voices are heard. This is why I put so much time into this, because I want Black voices to like be heard, but also to hear another side in which one person can finally understand and also get more information about who this person was, and not just leave them away. That these voices must be heard, and I'm blessed to be able to speak it out on it. And these are my references right here, and that's pretty much it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Noah, for a historically grounding and inspiring presentation. Our next presenter will be Jalen Parks.
Thank you. Before I get started, I'd like to offer a trigger warning for the video that I will show. It contains homophobic slurs, but hopefully that will not prevent you from receiving the information that I have.
Let me tell you something, young man. I don't know you. I don't know you, do I? Let me tell you something that's gonna help you. Amen. You're called of God. God chose you. God wants to salt you some more. Come out from among them sissified men that's been hanging around you. I didn't say you was a sissy. You understand what I'm saying? God can't use no men trying to be women. We call them faggots. I ain't calling you that. Understand that, understand it? But the ones that's been around you, they've been around you, haven't they?
Yes, ma'am.
Talk to me, boy. I don't play with God.
Deviance, defiance, deliverance. Beyond imprisonment of sexually defiant Black bodies. The preceding video was taken from the 111th Holy Convocation of the Church of God in Christ, colloquially known as COGIC, the largest Pentecostal holiness tradition in the United States. In the video, the viewer gains a glimpse into what in many Black church traditions is known as the altar call. During the altar call moment, typically the person who intends to do the prayer puts out a call, which those who feel led answer by coming to the altar. In this particular video, we do not know what the altar call is for, nor do we know for certain what the person in the video is expecting. Though based upon what we know about the altar call moment, we know that the person who answers the call is typically expecting something life-changing, miraculous even, to happen. I suspect, though, that the person in this video was not expecting what transpires in the little more than 60-second clip. However, What we do know is that Evangelist Mother Frances Kelly takes this moment not only to call out the perceived deviance of the person she is praying over, but also indicts all those who have been considered sexually deviant in her usage of the homophobic slurs, sissified men, and faggots. This video then serves as an apt entry point into the ways that the Black church has served as a metaphorical prison for those sexually deviant Black body persons that have darkened its doors throughout time and space, creating what I am terming the body prison industrial complex. This prison industrial complex is not found manifested in concrete buildings secured with barbed wire. No, it is wrapped in the flesh of those who would dare to deviate from the sexual ethical norms of the church. Similar to the prison industrial complex, this term seeks to give credence to the reality that there are overlapping interests between US society and the Black church that surveil, police, and imprison the Black defiant body person and those who inhabit it. Deviance. In her book chapter entitled Notes on Historical Grounding, Carter Hayward posits that in order for Christians to have a more robust understanding of human sexuality, they must take a historical look at it. For Hayward, we do not come to be who we are in any form, alone, or in a vacuum. Instead, we come to be who we are in relation to who others, especially those around us, become. This line of inquiry leads Hayward to assert that it is a historical reading of sexuality that will move society beyond sexual essentialism completely, which is to say that sexuality does not have fixed identities per se, but that our sexualities are in flux, constantly changing and evolving. Utilizing this as a line of departure, Hayward goes on to describe our fantasy, language that she co-opts from Dorothy Soule. According to Hayward, our fantasy is a creative mix of intuition and imagination that helps us experience and understand sexuality as an open and changing dynamic. Thusly, our fantasy can either be expanded or thwarted. The church, according to Hayward, has been the prime agent in the thwarting of fantasy that has led to an antagonistic attitude towards sexuality that is both oppressive and obsessive. Such thwarting of fantasy is on full display in this video of Mother Kelly and the person at the altar. To be clear, I am not making any assignation as to the sexual practices of this person in particular. Rather, I am pointing out the act of thwarting that Mother Kelly is engaged in. However, one could say that regardless of whether this person is what I have called elsewhere a defiant Black body, they become guilty by perceived association and thus must also be surveilled and punished. The thwarting then that leads to such surveillance and punishment began at the Council of Elvira held in 309 Common Era. This was the first time that an explicitly anti-sexual law was codified in Western Christianity. Unironically, the implementation of this code happened at the same time that the church ceded its role as an anti-imperial power and thus needed to forge a new identity. What initially began as sexual control over clergy eventually became a way for Christians, clergy and laity alike, to forge a new Christian identity based upon the metaphorical imprisonment of sexually defiant bodies. While there's an argument to be made about Black Christianity and consequently the Black church being different given their roots, the Black church is still a part of the church militant and cannot escape the remnants of the history and heritage that it lays claim to. This is especially true given the civilizing projects that many Black denominations and churches embarked upon during the 19th and 20th centuries in attempts to escape tropes of bestiality, primitivity, and the like. So while 309 CE was the point at which the Church Universal ceded its oppositional stance to imperial powers, the civilizing projects of the 19th and 20th centuries were the Black churches, whereby it ceded its opposition to the imperial powers of the time. Defiance. Having established a historical grounding around the church's anti-sexual practices, a turn should be made to the contemporary church and its anti-sexual practices as exemplified by the video of Mother Frances Kelly. In Religious Resistance to Neoliberalism, Carrie Day theorizes what she terms the acquiring mode. Day describes the acquiring mode as the neoliberal way of being that defines human meaning based upon the material things one can acquire. Humans become commodities, and thus components of relating and relationships such as trust and love are defined by market practices, resulting in the dehumanization of social relations. It is this acquiring mode, states Day, that prevents us from living entirely into our capacities of sharing, giving, and loving in community. As much as the Black church espouses an in the world but not of the world politic, the church is not exempt from this acquiring mode. In the Black church, this acquiring mode is manifested in our language when someone answers the altar call as seen in the video shown. The language popularly used in the Black church, while not stated explicitly in the video, is winning souls for Christ, which becomes utilized not only for those the church believes to not be saved, but also those that are called of God. In this way, the relationship then is not about the person entering into a communion of love, trust, and care, but it is, however, formulated such that it becomes about acquiring. The acquirer becomes a better Christian because they have acquired another commodity for Christ, where the soul becomes the commodity to be surveilled, punished, and paroled. This is especially the case when folks attempt to win the souls of sexually defiant Black folks and bring them into relationship with Christ. To be clear, winning the souls of sexually defiant folk does not mean them accepting Christ as their savior, but rather them turning from their wicked ways to go and sin no more, at least not in that way. This means performing sexuality in the ways that were enshrined in church doctrine at the Council of Elvira and fortified in the Black church's civilizing projects. However, the resulting relationship, in the words of Day, is one of deadness, not aliveness. Deliverance. One of the aims of the altar call is typically deliverance. One puts out a call for those that are suffering from a particular affliction, and one answers the call usually in hopes that you are delivered from what grievous affliction that you are suffering from. There's typically a range of afflictions that are included in an altar call, though one may argue that the most grievous and common affliction that is called out is perceived sexual deviance, as is the case in the video of Mother Kelly and the parishioner at the altar. But hopefully, by this point in my presentation, it is apparent that this notion raises critical questions, namely, who is it that actually needs deliverance and what do they need deliverance from? It is my contention that it is not necessarily the man in the video who needs deliverance, but it is Mother Kelly. Said in more general terms, it is not the sexually defiant Black body person that needs deliverance, but it is the church. The church needs deliverance from the grievous affliction of the acquiring mode that has so tainted its social witness beginning in the 19th and into the 21st century. The Black church, if it is to have any relevance in the 21st century, needs to worry less about winning souls for Christ through surveillance, corrections, and punishment, and focus more on its own deliverance from doing the work of the imperial state. I stated earlier that it's not the sexually defiant Black body person that needs deliverance, but the church. However, I don't necessarily think this is true. Many sexually defiant Black body persons who find their community and networks of mutual aid in the church do need deliverance, but not from their sexuality broadly construed. But they too need deliverance from the titillating tentacles of the acquiring mode that would dictate that they need to behave in cis-heteronormative, socially desirable ways in order to be deserving of love, care, and community. The bodies of sexually defiant Black folks have served as a prison to them for far too long. The deliverance needed, though, is not just some Christian colloquialism, but it is an abolition from surveillance, punishment, and probation of the body, one that embraces the mandate of Kojic Bishop G.E. Patterson to be healed, be delivered, and be set free. Thank you.
Thank you, Jalen, for that very powerful and moving presentation. Our next presenter will be Steve Nunez.
What's up, y'all? How we doing? I've been struggling with this. Really, honestly, I've been struggling with this presentation. I'm really excited for it, but I'm more excited for the conversation that I'm hoping mine and Brother Richard X's thoughts kind of provoke. So Amaia, could you do me a favor and could you just shout at me whenever I get 5 minutes? Could you do that for me?
Absolutely, will do.
Thank you. So I guess I'll preface this with a little bit of introductory context on how I kind of came to these thoughts. It's really tied into this potential dissertation project that I'm writing which revolves around the politics and ethics of revolutionary counterviolence. So to give a little background, in an anti-Black world, there's no possible way for Black peoples to pursue change non-violently, because any movement away from white supremacy is categorized by the violent systems that sustain it as itself violence. Thus, when Black folk use violence, what I term counter-violence, it can be considered violence, or it cannot be considered violence because it affirms rather than violates dignity. It's somewhat akin to preemptive self-defense. And there's a lot of philosophical nuance that I'm not going to dig into there. But this is also tied to revolution. And I think this term, we got to lay out what I'm talking about and what we're thinking about, or at least as I think about it. So individual acts of revolutionary counter-violence might not create what people typically think of as revolution, i.e. 1776, i.e. Haiti, i.e. all of these different very explosive events. But through Fanon, I argue that revolution is a praxis, not an event. And even when unsuccessful, revolutionary counterviolence serves to inspire an existential version of hope for justice in the masses. Not justice in relation to punishment, but as Derek Purnell frames it, justice as in a world where Black people thrive. To reframe a popular Kingian aphorism, the moral arc of the universe doesn't just bend towards justice, it must actively be bent. So in those sorts of terms, I just want to kind of highlight a number of different Black existentialists in the way that they have kind of been thinking about this very, very complicated and important concept. So it kind of started coming to me. I was reading Eddie Glaude's Begin Again, and I watched the back and forth between Brother West and Brother Glaude. And there's a quote, James Baldwin says, quote, "Hope is invented every day." So in these sorts of senses, we got to recognize that Black hope is criminal. And in a world where Black hope is criminal, the Black hopeful is necessarily militant and must be militant. In this regard, militant hope can't be detangled from the revolutionary spirit that drives it in our movements, particularly the Black freedom struggle. So like I said, in the Fanonian sense of revolution as an actional, creative orientation towards a future that doesn't yet exist, the praxis of reflecting on the past in Sankofa fashion to inform taking action in the present toward creating a future that we desire to die in. In service of revolution, this sort of militant hope is about responsibility. The responsibility for forging a reality worth handing over to the descendants of generations we haven't yet thought of. This is the sort of hope that serves as the pretext for an indignant rejection of current conditions. Fanon's refusal to, quote, bear a responsibility at whatever cost on the false pretext that nothing else is to be done, end quote. Despite the recognition that we could never possibly arrive at our at our own perpetually evolving conceptions of idealistic futures, through this existential frame, we can find serenity in, quote, moving through the world knowing that our footsteps matter, as Brother Anthony Penn so eloquently put it in the Sperry Room during a Du Bois lecture a few years ago. Similar existentialist tenets can be applied to and drawn from other conceptualizations of hope. Mariam Kaba, for example, developed the language to think of hope as a discipline. In a recent Beyond Prisons podcast, Kaba noted that in her organizing, she believes that there's always a potential for transformation and for change in any direction, good or bad. This is a really, really important point, I think, because oftentimes I think we come up with this conception of the future that locks in a closed dialectic. We think that we're pushing towards something and it may be something that we never arrive at. So rather than think about it like that, we need to look at it as an open dialectic with limitless possibilities. And those limitless possibilities must be informed by the present. give me 1 second. Kaba thinks of the idea of hope as a discipline, and she learned this from a nun who was talking about it in conjunction of making sure that we were of the world and in the world. Oftentimes, whenever we think about hope, it gets shifted into a sort of emotional state or an emotional or affective state. But indeed, there's a lot of emotional states that I think that we generally exclude from this concept of hope, like anger, rage, and so forth. But in reality, we ought to be outraged at the oppression in the world. While militant hope is driven by indignation and a maladaptation to justice, we ought not mistake those emotions for the existential praxis of hope. This shift from affective state to revolutionary praxis quickly reveals, as Kaba reminded us, that hope is distinct from optimism. Hope is not optimism. These are two different things.
Steve, I hate to cut you short.
Yeah,
but
5?
Five, right. Yes.
5,
I know
okay.
we're gonna get more into it.
Yeah, so I think this is the big point that I want to make, and I bring in Brother West for this. Optimism is different than hope, right? Brother West says that optimism adopts the role of a spectator who surveys the evidence in order to infer that things are going to get better. Yet we know that the evidence does not look good. The dominant tendencies of our day are unregulated global capitalism, racial balkanization, social breakdown, and individual depression. Hope enacts the stance of the participant who actively struggles against the evidence in order to change the deadly tides of wealth inequality, group xenophobia, and personal despair. Only a new wave of vision, courage, and hope can keep us sane and preserve the decency and dignity requisite to revitalize our organizational energy for the work that has to be done. To live is to wrestle with despair and yet never allow despair to have the last word. As we see, wrestling is this active sense of hope that West is bringing in to this question for us. But I'm going to close it out here and say that living in the legacies of white supremacy, especially amidst a global pandemic that has taken over 250,000, damn, we're at like 500,000 lives now. In the past year, the future most certainly looks bleak. The shit don't look good. But that shouldn't stop us from being hopeful, I argue. In the same way that Maisha Cherry at this very conference a couple of years ago described joy as bliss in spite of, hope is also inextricably tied to despair. As Ancestor Cone taught us, praxis without faith leads to despair. Brother West echoes this, noting that much of the time, hope might feel something like faith, or quote, stepping out onto nothing, hoping to land on something. But this is one place that I am in disagreement with Cone and West. For me, hope comes from knowing that I am the product of a rich, militant traditions of radical, red, anti-capitalist Blackness, predicated upon a blues disposition proclaiming that although we know we're going to continue to catch hell, together we will, and indeed must, struggle and continue to intentionally build soft spaces for folks to land on around us, one step at a time. So I'll leave it there and hand the mic back to Amaia. And I'm really, really excited to hear Brother Richard X's comments on hope, because I think that we're talking about it in really, really similar yet very different ways. And I'll leave it there. Thank y'all so much for your time. It is absolutely wonderful to be back in community, even if it's virtual from Cambridge. Shout out to everybody that's joining us.
Thank you so much. And what a radical and inspiring note to end on. I'm also really excited to get into Richard's response. So I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you. On November 12th, 1764, Captain Nathaniel Munford set sail. With his crew of 15 on board, they sailed out of Newport, Rhode Island with gold on their minds. They were set on a journey for an exchange that would set up their families for a future of financial security and prosperity. After almost a year of navigating the sea, Munford finally reached his destination, the shores of the western coast of Africa, in 1765. And it was here that he proceeded to purchase his gold. And immediately, the once empty ship was now filled with precious merchandise that was sure to change not only the lives of the men on board, but even the merchandise itself. The cargo for this floating marketplace was Black flesh. The name of this ship was hope. It may be impossible to speak on Black history, politics, writing, preaching, and theology without giving serious and sustained attention to the theme of hope. Many will argue that hope is the centering ethos of the Black community. Others would contend hope is the pragmatic, everyday practice of everyday living. It is the fuel to keep on keeping on. Some would even say that hope is a direct gift from the divine. Like joy, it is something the world can't give and the world can't take away. But most of all, hope was something that was ours. It was something that we didn't have to wait for anyone to give us. Rather, we could conjure the courage to believe all by ourselves. These are not claims I wish to necessarily contest, but to engage in dialogue with. My interest here is the deployment and usage of hope. And in strange times like these, hope seems to be everywhere. Churches, campaigns, organizers. The university I attend even planned an interfaith service entitled Rejoice in Hope. But what is this hope? What animates it? What are its contents and capabilities? Is it a tool for abolition? The hope of Black theology is a kind of defiance that believes structures and systems have the capacity and ability to change, or rather to repent and turn away from their wicked ways. As James Cone states, the praxis of Black theology is contingent upon this defiance. Quote, hope is the foundation of praxis, and praxis cannot be separated from faith, end quote. Therefore, the hope of Black theology is not solely individualistic, but speaks audaciously toward institutions that in turn provide language for the project of reform, redemption, activism, and protest. Here, tying between hermeneutics and history, we find hope. Yet the scandalous nature of this hope is not within its boldness, but its boundedness. As womanist scholars such as Dolores Williams and Will Gaffney have shown, the claim of hermeneutical hope is a messy endeavor. The God of the Bible does not precisely dismantle, disavow, or deliver from structural violence. Instead, he routinely marks such sites and behaviors as holy. Hope, too, is a contested historical claim. To claim that there is hope historically is to insist that there has been some type of arc or movement toward justice within the world that Black bodies exist in. This too has not proven to be true. In fact, theologian Miguel de la Torre proposes the exact opposite. Quote, we presently live in a world that is not getting better for the global marginalized, read the Black, but getting worse, end quote. One must look no further than the systemic evolution of law enforcement from slave catchers to police officers that reveals America's unyielding and unbroken commitment to capture and constrict and confine the Black body. This catastrophical truth upends our neat narratives about history and progress and has profound implications for a hope that places its not in history and political trajectory. The conditions of the post-emancipation proclamation Black body testify that there has been no emancipation at all. And if not rooted in hermeneutics or history, one must inquire again, where is this hope located and what is its groundings? I fear too often we have leaned toward a dislocated hope that rests in the very institutions it hopes to transform. Instead of hope that overthrows the powers and principalities of this world, Black theology has tended toward a lexicon of dependence and the continuation of and representation in the powers and principalities of this world. I argue that hope has become the primary vehicle for articulating a resilient and defiant belief in the project of America, in democracy, and subsequently in whiteness and slaveocracy. The liberal dictionary and logic of Black theology revolves around hope in concepts such as freedom, justice, liberty, concepts that have only had meaning by how they have been defined against the dead and dying Black body. Can these words have any substance outside of the juxtaposition of everyday Black life and violence used to create them? Or is this hope an invitation for a seat at a table for a feast where Black flesh is on the menu? If our hope demands the state and the state demands our death, then this hope is a cannibalistic commitment. Laura Bertland would call it cruel optimism, for our hope requires for us to desire the very thing that inhibits our flourishing. Our foreparents in the faith would sing about this type of hope as a sinking sand, an impossible foundation to build the imaginative capabilities of Black freedom and flourishing. Along these lines, hope is not in service to abolition, but rather bows at the altars of empire. Instead of standing in contrast to the structure of anti-Blackness, the shared resistance and defiance shares an inextricable commitment to irreconcilable anti-Blackness. Hope then is a laxative. It is how we relieve ourselves of the gut-wrenching anxiety of participating in a system that is inherently death-dealing. Hope then is an enchantment. It is an incantation we chant to ourselves in what Rebecca Wilcox names as distorted mirrors every morning to salvage the shattered fragments of neoliberal sanity. Hope then is a fairy tale. It is a story we whisper to our children and the generation after us to allow them to sleep at night, believing the monsters we faced aren't under their bed as well. Hope then is a noose, a startling, exfoliating experience that leaves Black flesh hanging on the mundane ropes of civil society. Ultimately, hope is homicidal. It is killing us. How many corpses of otherwise lay dead at the hands of hope? By this, I mean we must wrestle with how hope demands we conform and contort our thinking inside the very structures we are seeking to abolish. How many dreams of otherwise ways to practice communal accountability lay dead because of hope in policing? How many dreams of otherwise ways to form communities of restoration lay dead because of hope in prisons? How many dreams of otherwise ways to create networks of mutuality and aid and care lay dead because of hope in capitalism? How many otherwise ways to love one's flesh and body lay dead because of hope in gender? How many dreams of otherwise ways to know the divine and spirituality lay dead because of hope in European white Christianity? How many dreams of otherwise ways to just be and breathe lay dead because of hope of this demonic democratic experiment called America? If hope is anchored to the ship of anti-Blackness, then the Black cannot be hopeful and abolitionist at the same time. If hope, according to Black theology, is a spirit of defiance and resilience, and abolition asks us to imagine a world where defiance and resistance is not necessary, then we must press toward a world without hope. We must embrace hopelessness, not as a feeling of despair, but a critical framework that begins where redemption narratives end. We must live every day with hopelessness in America, its systems, and its capacity to bring about Black liberation. We must embrace hopelessness as a prophetic gift from God that allows us to begin to tell the truth about the pervasiveness and persistence of anti-Blackness. The struggle with this argument is it won't make anyone feel better. It won't ease your fears about your safety or your Black child. It won't allow what Van Jones calls a deep collective sigh of relief when the machinations of empire change hands from one state agent to another, even when the new agent is Black. It certainly won't help you close out a good sermon, but it will keep you from sinking into something worse than nihilism, and that is white optimism. In conclusion, I point toward Captain Mumford's slave ship once again, because somewhere and somehow between that fateful return trip, the merchandise, the cargo, the captive flesh, the slave got loose from their chains, and on that ship called Hope, all hell broke loose. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Richard, for taking us to church just now, and giving us a new idea of what hope or hopelessness looks like. And thank you to all of our panelists for their insightful, informative, and transformatively just ideas. I just wanted to get a little bit more into this idea of hope, considering that we have arguably two opposing ideas about what hope is or what hope isn't, and how that's utilized in the Black church and in the Black community more generally. And so on one hand, hope is a way to continue these ideas of liberation and justice and even despair, and that they do lead to good for the Black community. But on the other hand, we see hope being a enchanting laxative, as Richard puts it, something that is a facade of that white supremacy uses in order to keep Black folks down and in order to keep us from actual liberation. So this is actually going to be a two-part question, if that's all right. The questions are, how might hope or hopelessness be a conduit to transformative justice? And how might it be a conduit to transformative justice in academic and or religious and or spiritual spaces? We can start with Steve or Richard and then move into the other panelists, unless any other panelists are willing and ready to answer.
Oh, yeah. Hello? Oh, I'm ready. Oh yeah, I got you. Like the one thing about with my presentation and also the question as well too is that ironically and also just big impact itself, Johnny Voss didn't truly know his heritage. He didn't know that he was Black. And that was like a thing of just more so just saying that the terms that we have today is very empowering, it's very pushing forward to what we need. But with what we seek now and what like we grow like towards, Johnny Voss's a message of like a loss of saying that this is the hope that he needed, and the hope that was designed in like his lifetime could not fit ours. There was a time of liberation in which he was facing both a physical and also like a spiritual against what he wanted. And again, the Nazi empire itself that like he faced, it was a part in which that there was that physical structure such as which the Black Lives Matters movement sees like now. But the hope that we want from both Johnny's like standpoint and also now, the historical need is that there needs to be an intervention of kind of just saying that there needs to be grounds made. That the reason why we have the advancements that we have now is actually because of what has been done in the past. So we must continue that, and we must like continue to revamp our hope. If like hope is a stagnant object, then we cannot move forward to what we need to do. As in, the hope should not be non-existent or should be living constantly again. It needs to die. It needs to constantly recycle itself. And that is exactly how we are able to liberate ourselves, by having a living and breathing movement that gives us the compensation we need to survive and also live within the shadowed world itself.
I'm happy to jump in real quick. I think I'll preface this with a Du Bois quote in the way that Du Bois, and Souls of Black Folk, Du Bois describes hope not hopeless, but unhopeful. I think that distinction between hopelessness and unhopefulness is really, really important. And I think it's something that both Brother Richard X and I are kind of pointing at. To the point, one of the reasons why I frame it as militant hope is because there ain't no fucking way in the world I'm letting some cracker that doesn't want me to be hopeful win. That's just not gonna happen. I'm not gonna let you take hope away from me. So for me, it becomes a project of, well, how do we reframe this in a way that we can fulfill ourselves, not to imbue the United States of America, but rather abolish that motherfucker and create new spaces and new different ways of being from its ashes after we burn it down. So that for me is part of the reason why I won't give up hope. I won't let white people win. I'm not going to let crackers have that from me. So that's kind of where I'm at and why I will continue to continue thinking about a hope that's unhopeful, because I don't have any hope that any of my dreams will ever be realized, or that racism will ever be gone, or that homophobia will ever be gone, or that will upend racial capitalism, or that will upend patriarchy, or any of these different various systems of violence. I'm actually not hopeful. I'm not optimistic at all. But I do know that through action that we can take today, through creating new institutions to create different sorts of persons, that we might be able to get a little bit closer to that future that I want to die in. So that is why I will continue to hang on to hope, because I'm not willing to let it go that easily.
I will jump in here and I will say that I think I agree with Steve on this point, especially for the fact that I think when you turn away from militant hope or radical hope, or however you want to phrase it, and you lean into hopelessness, not that it can't be productive, but that there tends to be, or I think that there tends to be like a lose or loss in some of like that driving force, that push. Like Steve is saying, hope is what can push people toward either like saying, burn the institution all down and start it over, or reform it from within. But either way, there's some sort of fire lit under people to kind of get from the present to the future in a way that makes it look like what we hope it looks like or what we want it to be. So I think that it is a necessity, but I don't think that it has to be a passive hope or a hope that bends its will toward anti-Black institutions. Yeah.
So it seems like we're reaching some sort of an agreement on what hope actually looks like. And that comes from distinguishing this patriarchal, white supremacist, cis heteronormative hope from this radical militant hope that pushes us beyond and pushes us into a future that in which we can reach liberation and in which we can look back to our ancestors, look back to Black people from the past, so that we can be inspired, but also move forward into something that is real and tangible for Black people in America, but also globally in these academic spaces, but also these religious and spiritual spaces. I want to get more into how these religious and spiritual spaces can be restricting and incarcerating for marginalized people. Jalen, you talked a little bit in your presentation about how the Black church is this restricting space for Black queer bodies. And you term this as the body industrial complex, alluding to this greater carceral system in which we call the prison industrial complex. So I'm wondering, do we see this body industrial complex being present in academic spaces? And if so, how and where?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Amaia. I think we absolutely do see it in academic spaces. I think it might look a little bit differently, but as we know, even with the carceral state, there are many faces to the carceral state. And so I would say, I think it looks like the amassing of Black people or Black body persons, queer body persons in spaces, and then just corralling them there and not actually giving them the support that they need in order to achieve the things that they would want to achieve or do. As I heard someone say this morning, specifically in regard to the institution that I attend, Black people want PhDs too. And so you can't get us here and not give us the support we need in order to actually attain PhDs. That's a form of the carceral state, getting us here just to have us work and produce in service of this institution, and then not actually benefit us and our long-term goals. So I think that it also manifests itself in different ways, but I think that the most prominent way in academic settings that this is manifested is through the acquiring of Black and queer bodies in spaces that don't actually support their wholeness and their thriving.
I'll jump in since there's an awkward silence. I personally hate the locution Black body. I don't know if I've ever heard the locution white body in a sentence. Why is that? I don't know. That's a problem. Does it exist? Yeah, absolutely. We have diversity and inclusion vice presidents and CDOs, chief diversity officers on every campus in the United States. I think to tie this into the idea of bodies, Black skin, white mask is extremely important in this conversation, I think, particularly because it's not just Black bodies that people are afraid of, right? There's a fear of Black consciousness. There are Black people in leadership positions across the United States of America that will sit there and acquiesce to a white supremacist order in order to gain capital or whatever it may be to get along in the world. So for me, I think that the Cartesian terrorism of the mind-body dualism is absolutely violent and forces us to strip Black bodies of their dignity, of their personality, of their humanity, of all of these different things, of their thought, of their ideas, of their dreams. All of those things go into personhood, and I'm not willing to just call it a body. And particularly the consciousness part, right? How often do radically conscious people, anti-capitalists, become vice presidents or chief diversity officers? This doesn't happen in my experience. You have to go along with the program of Harvard Divinity School in order to, or whatever school it is, in order to become in a position to which they'll hire you to continue. They're not going to hire you to destroy the institution. Who's going to do that? Tell me that, Dean Hempton. Are you going to hire me to destroy your institution? No, you're not. So I know this very clearly. That's not my project. So therefore, it has to be part of the project to uphold the very institutions in which we attach ourselves to even be in that position in the first place. So yeah, I hate the word Black body. I hate the locution Black body. I think it does massive amounts of violence to the way we conceptualize people, human beings. So I'll leave it there.
I want to just jump in and say, I think that I said body persons, and maybe the person's part fell off of that. And so.
Oh, that wasn't at you. That was just at Black bodies. You were very careful with that. That wasn't you.
Absolutely. And at the same time, yeah. Okay.
Yes, thank you for both of those answers. And I think those are very good points to make, because it's not just about how many people we're getting into the academic system, but how are we supporting them while they're here? And how are we supporting them even before they get into the academic system? What are those seemingly small but meaningful and powerful steps in which we can take in order for these broader institutions to not just amplify Black queer voices, but also not to look at them as a mass, not to just look at them as these group of bodies, but to look at them as their whole, and in a way that dismantles this white imagination that we have and brings consciousness into Black queer folks. The last question I will ask comes from a combination of Noah and Tatiana's presentations. And so Noah, you give a very personal account of the Black man at Dachau reaching liberation. And this is a story in which you say that you desire to give a voice to a Black individual in history. I'm sorry if I'm butchering that exact quote, but in doing so, you talk about their personal liberation and how that can lead to liberation in the academic system. And Tatiana, you bring to your presentation the Black theological imperative and this idea of a necessity to rewrite the canon to create tangible and transformative state change. So what are other ways in which we can rewrite the canon per se to see change in academic and or religious and spiritual spaces?
Well, to start, I think that to rewrite the canon, you have to physically change who's allowed to have a say-so in it, basically. You have to change what it looks like for someone to be told that their theological constructions or historical understandings are valid in that. And so, like you said, I focus on Black theology, but I think there are scholars doing the same right now for Latinx theology, Asian theology, Native American theology, queer theology, et cetera. And I think like that's how you begin rewriting the canon, both in academia and in the church. And you have to, or I guess the canon has to be willing to accept this idea of change and diversity to begin with, because without the willingness to allow that change, it will stay stagnant. So there is some force and some push that has to be applied in the understanding of the diversity of these voices, but I think that's how you start, is getting them there. And then like Jalen and Steve were saying before, giving them the support, accepting them, making sure that they're not just there, but that they're valued, and that they're used, and that they are not put on a pedestal, but given the privilege to speak and be themselves in the fullness of what they're saying.
I agree like with like that as well. One thing with the story of Johnny Voss is that I didn't necessarily have, I can't get every background from every part of his story itself. It is unknown. Most of the stuff dating like back to his birth, like everything like that, it's just completely out of water because Black voices are being downplayed. There is like we have like seen this from time to time again with like the teachers, with actually like with like also scholars as well too, whereas like we see as there is a filtration of the Black voices that we hear. As in there is like a certain piece in which, oh, Martin Luther King talked about this, there's like peace. And it's like, but he mentioned different ways of the necessary actions in which we place ourselves and how we revolutionize ourselves to combat these four forces ahead. And with Johnny like Voss and his like actions within Dachau, it's just a micro stage of what can really happen within the world. As in we can change the inner workings of like the societies that we live in as well, as long as we have people that are willing to take it to more so expand themselves. Because Johnny like Voss could have easily just said, no, I'm just going to sit inside of a cell and not help anyone out. He had no friends. He had nobody there to support him. He had nothing. There was nothing for him to accomplish. There was nothing for him that could at his like factory say, I'm doing a great job. There was no Black voices surrounding him. So how did he get this? How did he get this idea out? How did he start helping people? It's because he looked beyond himself. He looked beyond the culture. He looked beyond the voice in which he exclaimed and said, I am going to fight for my life. These people in here are fighting for their lives as well too. Why not I? The liberation is in the life itself, how we live and how we like perceive the culture surrounding us. And again, it's the power in which like we have. So it's very important for us to empower like the voices we have now and also the future speakers as well. Because if we don't, then we just leave ourselves open for anyone outside of our race to change the narrative about us. we need to keep a great narrative about us, no matter what.
Couldn't agree more. And I want to amend my question a little bit, given that it's not that we're necessarily giving voices to people of the past, but their voices already exist. It's a matter of us amplifying those voices in academic spaces, amplifying Black voices in academic spaces, and amplifying the future voices, like you said, of Black students, of Black faculty, of Black people in academic institutions in general, so that we're creating that real, intangible, and just change in these elite spaces. So we are nearing closing time. Unfortunately, I couldn't get to all of the questions. However, I do want to give space to our panelists to share their contact information so that we can reach out to them in the future, and also give space to them to share any closing thoughts that they might have.
Okay, I can start. I just want to say thank y'all again for putting on this conference. You guys did a fantastic job, and thank you for having us. And as far as contact info, do we just like drop it in the chat? Is that how this goes? Okay, I will throw that in there now.
I would mirror the same thing. Thank you so much for creating and curating this space. I will place my Twitter and IG in the chat and say to build our hopes on things eternal. And that is Black freedom. That's it.
Oh, I just dropped like my IG. It's at no. And again, I just want to thank you so much for all that you do. And I'm extremely grateful to be a part of this and just to like spread this piece of history around and just continue to amplify your voice and just be strong. You got this.
Yeah, I'd just like to thank the organizers as well for having all of us, and my fellow panelists for being in conversation together. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I'll also drop my IG and maybe my Twitter in the chat. But thank you all again so much.
Thank you all so much, particularly Amaia. Thank you so much for prepping us in the past week and bringing us together so that we could have this back and forth in the way that we did. Thank you to all of the organizers for this, the 5th annual. It means a lot to me. This conference means a lot to me, knowing the history of where this conference came from. I won't go into all that, but I'm glad to see it going on in the middle of a pandemic, and it's good to be in community with y'all, even though it's virtually. I want to boost the Harvard Prison Divestment Campaign. I want to boost the idea, the fact that UConn has an $18 million police budget. I want to boost the idea, man, free them all. That's it. Abolition now.
Thank you all so much again. And I hope that we feel connected, challenged, and moved to act after this. Amen, ashe, blessings to you all. Thank you.